And the only reason I mention it is because the massive increase in regulations that the banks face right now, they don't even know what they are. Dodd-Frank is basically half-written. Basel III keeps changing. I mean, Basel II was never implemented completely. Basel III, with the capital requirements and things, are still being discussed. So it's a kind of a harsh world to be a real banker in, as opposed to the mobile bank. I mispronounced it, but
I said regulatory excuse. Regulatory excuse is an excuse not to do anything. And that's what the reason why most banks don't do anything. And if you look at, obviously I'm slightly UK oriented, but if you look at Australian banks, if you look at American banks, what they do is they end up layering change on top of old systems, and then they end up being bound by their legacy. And then they complain about their legacy, then they get crashes because they try and change their legacy. And the real issue is that banks are not responding to regulation as an opportunity to refresh. They're viewing it as a compliance process that they have to just implement at the minimum cost level.
Well, they're looking at the enforcement side, rather than what's the underpinning, a reason for the regulatory shift. And I'll just tell you the experience we've had at Movement Bank, when we've gone to the US regulators, all of the banks that we spoke to all said, oh, the regulators aren't going to like this, they're not going to like the fact that you're called Movement Bank, and you're not a bank, you don't have a bank charter, and credit sounds a lot like a credit score.
I couldn't register my bank name for this.
Right. Yeah, and they're getting all stressed about all of that. Then when we met with the regulators, they said, hey, we've been watching what you guys are doing, it's fantastic, it's going to produce a great effect for consumers, so we're all for it. How can we help you? Would you like us to help you write the disclosures for your customers? It's exactly the opposite from what the industry tells you the way regulators do that. But banks are so worried about regulation from an enforcement perspective, they don't want to talk to regulators about what they're doing in case the regulator might get them on something, which I think this is a systemic problem.
Actually, I won't leave it too long. We had a great dinner the other night talking about anti-money laundering. And one of the main banks there said, do you know what, we have more people now checking our transactions for compliance with anti-money laundering than the number of staff who process transactions. We have more people checking than processing.